Iran named a new supreme leader, and fresh missile barrages toward Israel were reported in the same window. On the night of March 8th to 9th, as the Assembly of Experts announced that Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the slain former leader, had been chosen to succeed his father, Iranian forces launched what multiple reports described as one of the largest salvos of the war. The timing drew attention, but whether one caused the other cannot be confirmed from public evidence. Iranian state media broadcast footage of a projectile said to be launched at Israel bearing the slogan, "At your command, Sayyid Mojtaba." State media framed the launch as symbolism tied to the succession. To Iran's domestic public, the revolution continues. To Israel, the war escalates. To Washington, the succession Tehran says you tried to prevent has happened. Observers interpret the signal differently. The Assembly of Experts, the 88-member clerical body responsible for selecting Iran's supreme leader, announced the appointment on state television. The presenter solemnly read the statement next to a photograph of the new 56-year-old leader. Mojtaba's father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in the first wave of joint U.S. Israeli strikes on February 28th, according to Reuters and AP, citing officials and state media accounts, though independent confirmation remains limited. Iranian state media and AP reported the IRGC pledged allegiance to Mojtaba soon after the announcement, signaling the security establishment is closing ranks around the new leader. The appointment was not unexpected. Mojtaba had been widely discussed as a potential successor for years, though his elevation was contested by other factions within the clerical establishment who viewed dynastic succession as contrary to the revolution's principles. The fact that the assembly moved during a war, under bombardment, with the country's infrastructure under sustained attack, suggests the leadership prioritized rapid consolidation during wartime conditions. The appointment came hours after a pointed statement from President Trump. On March 8th, Trump declared that whoever was chosen to lead Iran without U.S. approval would not last long, a remark widely interpreted in Tehran as an open threat. Iran's response was to name the successor anyway, and to attach his name to the next volley of missiles. Iran's messaging framed the next barrage as defiance. Whether it was directed personally by the new leader is unknown. The missiles arrived in waves. Fresh Iranian projectiles were fired toward Israel on the intervening night of March 8th and 9th, triggering a new round of alerts only hours after earlier barrages had appeared to subside. According to the Times of Israel, early warning sirens blared across large parts of central Israel, forcing residents to rush back into shelters for the second time in one night. The sirens sounded just minutes after authorities had declared the previous salvo over, catching many people off guard as they were beginning to emerge from protected spaces. Incoming missile alerts were issued in Tel Aviv and the Shvela region to the south. Interceptions were heard overhead, but not everything was intercepted. Falling shrapnel was reported in Rishon LeZion and Lod, where fragments from destroyed missiles rained down on streets and buildings. Within minutes, additional sirens began sounding in the north, signaling the strike had a wider geographic scope. Alerts were reported in parts of northern Israel, including the Haifa area, according to Israeli reporting. A woman in her 40s in Rishon LeZion was moderately wounded when she was struck by debris, according to Israeli reporting. Israel's emergency services said she was not inside a bomb shelter at the time and was moderately wounded by flying debris. Rishon LeZion's mayor told Channel 12 that there was notable damage to at least one building, with windows blown out and structural harm reported. Additional impacts from falling debris and interceptor fragments were reported in Lod and Modi'in, according to the Times of Israel. The pattern of shrapnel damage across multiple cities suggests that the volume of incoming fire, combined with the number of interceptions, is creating a secondary debris field that extends well beyond the intended impact zones. Even successful interceptions produce falling fragments that can injure and kill. In recent days, Israeli reporting has increasingly noted injuries from debris even when interceptions succeed. As the conflict enters its 10th day, the cumulative toll is becoming harder to dismiss. Shrapnel injuries, building damage, civilians caught outside shelters. The cumulative toll of repeated salvos is beginning to register in ways that intercepted missiles alone do not capture. Israeli reporting has cited fatalities and injuries since the war began, with totals varying by update. The human cost on the Iranian side is far larger, according to Tehran's own figures. Iran's health ministry claimed at least 1,200 civilians killed and about 10,000 wounded, figures that have not been independently verified. But if even a fraction is accurate, the civilian toll in Iran dwarfs the losses reported in Israel. The asymmetry of casualties, one of the defining features of this war, is widening with every day of sustained bombardment. The United States is also absorbing losses. U.S. reporting said a 7th American service member died from injuries sustained in the region, underscoring the mounting human cost for Washington. Iranian officials, however, claimed that the United States is concealing the true scale of its losses and insist that more than 500 U.S. service members have been killed so far in the fighting. That figure has not been corroborated by any independent source and is flatly contradicted by the Pentagon's confirmed count. But the claim continues to circulate in Iranian media and is aimed squarely at American public opinion. The gap between 7 confirmed and 500 claimed is not a rounding error. It is a measure of how far apart the two information environments have drifted. And in a war where neither side permits independent access to its casualties, the gap may never close. Israel did not pause for the succession announcement. The IDF launched a new wave of strikes targeting infrastructure in central Iran. Reports described fresh strikes in and around Tehran, with smoke seen in multiple areas after overnight hits on fuel depots. The strikes follow the pattern of the past week. Oil storage, military compounds, airports, and sites the IDF describes as IRGC linked. Each day, the target list expands. Each night, the smoke over Tehran thickens. The war has now spread well beyond the Iran-Israel axis. Saudi officials reported an intercepted drone threat near an eastern oil field. Separately, authorities said a projectile fell in Al-Kharj province, killing 2 and injuring 12. The UAE and Kuwait reported missile attacks. Bahrain said sirens were activated. The U.S. authorized departure of non-emergency personnel and families from Saudi Arabia, citing safety risks. Iran is now striking or being accused of striking 4 Gulf Arab states simultaneously. The regional architecture of the conflict has fundamentally changed. What began as a U.S.-Israeli strike on Iran is now a multi-front war touching every major energy-producing state in the Gulf. Iranian officials have insisted throughout the war that their campaign is focused on U.S. and Israeli military targets, not on the sovereignty of Gulf states. But drone attacks on Saudi oil infrastructure, missiles landing in Kuwaiti and Emirati territory, and sirens in Bahrain tell a different story. Whether these are deliberate strikes on Gulf states or collateral effects of a campaign aimed at U.S. bases within them is a distinction Tehran is trying to maintain. For the governments in Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Kuwait City, the distinction may no longer matter. The State Department's order to evacuate non-emergency staff from Saudi Arabia reflects a calculation that the Gulf is no longer a safe rear area. It is an active theater, and every government in the region is now recalculating its exposure. On the northern front, the ground war intensified. Hezbollah said its fighters engaged Israeli helicopters and an infiltrating force with appropriate weapons. Lebanon's state-run national news agency reported fierce clashes around the town of Nabi Shit. Israel said it struck a hotel in Beirut and claimed it targeted IRGC-linked commanders. Lebanon reported impacts and clashes elsewhere. 2 Israeli soldiers have been killed in Lebanon since the ground operation began. The front is no longer limited to artillery exchanges. It is ground combat. The geographic scope of Iranian operations continued to expand. Bahrain said an Iranian drone attack hit the island of Sitra off its coast. Sitra is home to oil refining infrastructure and sits in the heart of the Persian Gulf's energy corridor. If Iran is now striking targets in Bahrain's island chain, the conflict has reached a geographic footprint that encompasses virtually the entire Gulf. Every capital in the region is now within demonstrated range. Return to the missile that carried Mojtaba's name. The symbolism was deliberate and layered. Naming a weapon after the new supreme leader on the night of his appointment serves multiple purposes. It binds the succession to the war. It frames the conflict as a continuation of the martyred father's will. It tells the IRGC rank and file that the chain of command is intact. And it tells Washington that the leadership vacuum Trump hoped to exploit has been filled, publicly, defiantly, and with a missile attached. The speed of the IRGC's pledge matters. In a system where the supreme leader commands the armed forces, the Revolutionary Guard's loyalty is not symbolic. It is operational. The pledge signals an attempt to project unity, though internal dynamics remain hard to verify from outside. The war continues under new leadership. The tempo does not change, and every missile launched under Mojtaba's authority reinforces the message that the Islamic Republic's command structure survived the decapitation strike that was supposed to paralyze it. 10 people killed in Israel by Iranian missiles. At least 1,200 civilians reported killed in Iran, according to Tehran's health ministry. 7 American soldiers confirmed dead by the Pentagon, with Iran claiming over 500. 2 Israeli soldiers killed in Lebanon, 2 killed and 12 wounded in Saudi Arabia. The numbers are disputed on every side, but the trajectory is not. The casualty figures are climbing in every theater for every party, with no ceasefire in sight. Iran, Israel, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, the Strait of Hormuz, the Indian Ocean, 7 countries, 2 oceans, and 1 narrow waterway that carries a fifth of the world's oil. This is no longer a bilateral conflict. It is a regional war with global economic consequences. And on the night Mojtaba Khamenei was named supreme leader, Iran made sure the world understood that the succession would not mean a pause. It would mean an escalation. And the missile that carried his name was the first proof. Subscribe to WLA for daily geopolitical analysis.